Vladimir Putin has yet again faced humiliation on Russian soil. In just 24 hours, Ukraine launched one of the largest drone attacks of the entire war. First, it struck oil depots, rail hubs, and then air bases, deeper and deeper inside of Russia. And just hours ago, it was confirmed that the oil depot at Sochi Airport, used by civilians and the military both, is on fire. Ukrainian drones had paid it a visit. But what's more, Ukraine now has come forward and says that it successfully carried out drone strikes on Saky Airbase in Russian occupied Crimea and successfully destroyed or damaged multiple Russian military aircraft. So when we look at this, we see that things are not going the way that Vladimir Putin had planned for his 3-day special military operation. In fact, we see that at this point, it's Ukraine taking the initiative. It's Ukraine taking the war to Russia. But even more incredible than that, the news gets yet worse for the Kremlin. Because Russian Telegram isn't just talking about a number of drone strikes. It's worried about something else. It's worried that the liberation of Crimea might be at hand. My name is Jason Smart. I'm a special correspondent for the Kiev Post. And for 20 years, I've studied the Putin regime, the topic of my master's and my PhD. But I wasn't just studying, I was also working, actively working against the Putin regime, which is why back in 2010, the Russian government determined that I was a threat to Russian national security and put me on the blacklist for life. I mean, I can never again travel to Russia. But what we see happening right now inside of Russia is truly phenomenal. It's even hard to believe. Ukraine is carrying out massive strikes. Just in the past 24 hours, we've seen oil refineries blow up. We've seen oil depots blow up. We've seen the airports attacked. We've seen the rails attacked. We've seen the bridges attacked. And despite the videos, which we'll show you, very little of this ends up in the Western press, which is why I created this channel. To bring the truth about what's happening inside of Russia, to decode and decipher the Putin regime and other authoritarian regimes like it, while also revealing what is really going on here where I am right now in Kiev, Ukraine. I ask you just one favor. Help me to get this message to more people. Help me to inform the world of why supporting Ukraine is so very important. And the means to do that, it costs you nothing, but it helps me immensely. Please like this video. Please subscribe to this channel. And please consider becoming a channel member today. Thank you. So these attacks being carried out by Ukraine are obviously very impressive. And what's more impressive is how the Russian government is trying to respond to this. So just from the attacks last night, not even getting to the ones in Saky Airbase, in Crimea, nor the ones in Sochi, just the ones last night, Russia's Ministry of Defense confirmed that 61 Ukrainian drones have been struck down across Russian territory. And what's interesting about that is they gave a list. So there were 6 over the Volgograd region, 8 in the Belgorod region, 12 in Voronezh, a couple in Rostov, Bryansk, Moscow. But then there were 11 in Crimea and 18 over the Black Sea. 29 out of 61, that means, were in the vicinity of Crimea. And what's incredible about these attacks was that they were synchronized strikes. They were specifically done to overwhelm air defenses across multiple vectors. And that's why we see that today, Russia's skies are wide open. And they're getting more and more wide open. But the attack just carried out by the Security Service of Ukraine, SBU, at the Saky Airbase is incredibly important. This is probably the largest attack since June 1st, since Operation Spiderweb, on a Russian airbase. So this attack damaged or destroyed 5 different Russian military aircraft. That includes destroying one Su-30, one Su-39 that was damaged, and 3 Su-34s which were also damaged. But moreover, the attack in Sochi at the airport is a big deal. As we've discussed before, Sochi is the top vacation spot for Russians. It's where the top elites go. The people who are in charge of the country and those with the most wealth go to places like Sochi. It is so expensive that the average Russian could never afford to go there. But that's why the fact that it's being struck routinely by Ukrainian drones is so important. You remember just a couple weeks ago, it was struck by Ukrainian drones. And what made that really amazing? They came within kilometers of Vladimir Putin's estate there. And sure enough, the next day, Vladimir Putin got out of town. He headed to Arkhangelsk, which is near the Arctic Circle. It's about as far away as you can get. So that shows you how concerned he was. So just imagine how the average Russians now feel looking at this airport, the most posh one in their country, and the oil depot is burning. So much so that flights, even yesterday before this attack, flights leaving Sochi due to previous Ukrainian drone attacks there had to make multiple stops out, stop at smaller airports after leaving Sochi to get more fuel because there's simply not enough of it there. This will make it impossible for Russia to refuel from Sochi. But this is in addition to the attacks last night. Keep in mind that Ukraine struck the Frolova rail junction in Volgograd last night. That explosion knocked out the power, stopped the trains, and disrupted the entire corridor. In fact, Telegram channels are reporting that the drone hit right between the rails, and that was able to shut down the movement between Saratov and Moscow. And this wasn't the first time. This was the 12th confirmed strike on Russian rail hubs since early summer. Ukraine at this point is severing Russia's military logistics, one junction at a time. And they're doing it all for the confines of Ukraine. They're not even physically crossing into Russia. But the drones get into Russia. Look at what happened in Bryansk. Russian troops blew up their very own supply bridge. The reason is simple. That bridge had already been mined in advance. But the troops there, the Russian troops, heard a drone nearby. They thought it was Ukrainians advancing. So they detonated the bridge in panic. So no Ukrainian missile was needed. No Ukrainian drone landed on the bridge. Russian fear alone collapsed the route. And that fear permeates Russia. Since Ukraine's Operation Spiderweb on June 1st, satellite images confirm that Russia is moving its aircraft across the country, get them as far away from the Ukrainian border as possible, realizing that at any point, Ukraine could attack. And they don't have a lot of solutions because Russia struggles to produce much of anything, but military technology especially. Their ability to accept more losses to Ukrainian drones is minimal. At this point, the greater fear, though, is not what will happen with those bases. It's what it will happen next in Crimea. So just earlier today, before this most recent strike by the Ukrainians on the airbase, the bridge, the Kerch bridge, which connects Russian-occupied Crimea to mainland Russia, it was backed up. It was so backed up that more than 2,000 vehicles were stranded on it. In fact, the backup was 30 kilometers, 18 miles, which is the length of Manhattan long, because the Russians were sure that the Ukrainians were about to tank out the bridge. The fear within the society caused everything to close. The fear is causing Russian soldiers to blow up their own bridges by mistake. The fear at this point is choking the Russian economy. The last time that the bridge closed down like this was back in 2022. This time, the mere possibility of a Ukrainian attack was enough to shut it down, which is incredible when you contemplate that this had once been a symbol of Russia's control, the fact that it built this massive bridge. But today, it's actually a reflection of the Kremlin's fragile nature. It cannot even protect this symbol. And the reason is very simple. Crimea is no longer insulated. It's quite exposed. And both the Kremlin and Ukraine know it. And there's other signals that probably make the Russians nervous. We've been following how the US Artemis surveillance jets, the Bombardier Globals, are flying on a daily basis from Romania. Now, what are they doing? Well, these aircraft are detecting the radar emissions, the convoy movements, the missile deployments, all across Crimea and the Black Sea. This gives Ukraine full spectrum battlefield vision, and it's acting on it. It's taking advantage of what it learns. And that's something that the Russians don't have anything similar to. There's no way that they can keep up with what the Ukrainians are doing. Ukraine's new doctrine suppresses air defenses before launching the drones. Radar sites and surface to air missiles are blinded. But then the Ukrainians begin to attack. This strategy worked very well for Ukraine in Novorossiysk, and it works every single week so far in Crimea. And it's funny is that Russia's very own navy concedes that Crimea now is better defended than Moscow. But in fact, it might not be more secure because fortifications ultimately mean nothing when the targeting is this precise. Just think of what Russia has. The Kerch bridge is obviously vulnerable. The ports are under watch, but at any point, Ukrainian sea drones could arrive. The airfields across Russia are emptying out due to the fear of Ukrainian drones. Ukrainians, at this point, have been successful. They have cleared the path. The only real question at this point is the timing. Not if, but when will the liberation of Crimea arrive? Which is why it's sort of laughable at this point when you hear the Russians say things like they're planning a new offensive. They'll go to Kharkiv, Pokrovsk, Sumy. It's unrealistic. Russia can barely keep its own territory under its own control. It is getting worse and worse for the Putin regime. Russia's supply lines are simply degraded at this point. Its fuel is being rationed to the military convoys. Aircrafts are fleeing from the front because the Ukrainians could attack them. Their bridges are falling down due to self-inflicted detonations. These are not the conditions for a country to start an offensive. Rather, they are symptoms of institutional collapse. And behind all of this, we have the Russian economy, which is imploding upon itself. So drone strikes on the refineries is causing damage to the Russian economy as well. And it's allowing Ukraine an advantage. It's allowing Ukraine to change the battlefield, to refuse to fight a war of attrition with Russia, the type of war that Russia would want, because a larger country is the one that has an advantage. But Ukraine has said no to that. Ukraine is instead taking the war to Russia, strategically, tactically, taking out one facility after another, and making it simply impossible for the Putin regime to wage war. So at this point, it's not a question of how long can Russia go? It's really just a question of how long until Putin finally realizes that he has no options. Because at this point, he seems not to realize how bad his situation has become. And that's the mistake of surrounding himself with yes men for so many years. By this point, Russia is no longer shaping the events. It's simply chasing Ukraine's momentum and losing ground with every single step. Thank you for watching. Please like this video. Please subscribe to the channel. And as always, thank you for supporting